A good life is a life built around fulfilling work, play, relationships, and lifelong learning. Welcome to Good Life Conversations, where we explore the stories and strategies of inspiring everyday people who are striving to create a life of purpose, meaning, and connection. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode with Adam Kourakis. My name is Jay Gosselin. I'm the host of the Good Life Conversations. And Adam and I met a number of years ago, probably 6 or 7 years ago now. We met because Adam came to my home in the capacity of owner and operator and bike mechanic. He's the owner operator of Velofix, Ottawa. And he came to my home to tune up my bike. And I was so impressed with Adam's customer service skills, his work ethic, his curiosity. And I don't meet people that deliver that level of service very often. So we got to chatting quite a bit, and I was really impressed and admired Adam for a lot of reasons. And I thought he'd be a great example to introduce to our students. So he's been meeting with our Discover Your students for a number of years now. And Adam is also the owner of Somersault, which is a multi-sport race series. So he's an athletic guy. He loves sports, and he's turned that into his career, which I think is really inspiring and very cool. So welcome, Adam.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks for having me.
So, Adam, maybe we can start. We always like to start with these rapid fire questions because young people today expect to get information quickly and efficiently. So I'd love to dive into some rapid fire questions, and then maybe we can unpack some of those things a little bit down the road.
Lay it on me. Let's go.
Okay, so Good Life Conversations, these are all about a holistic way of being, not just about careers, not just about money, not just about health, but about everything really, relationships. So if you can, tell us a little bit about your day-to-day routine. What does a common day look like for you? What time do you get up? Do you have a morning routine? How many hours do you work? Any habits that you implement throughout the day to keep healthy? What time do you go to bed? What does a day look like?
So I'm nothing if not consistent. Each day looks very similar, but very different at a granular level, I guess. But I get up every morning around 5, 5:15, 5:20, depending on what time the first appointment is. Because I get up, do your morning routine, which I've gotten down to a pretty good science. It takes me, no more than 20 minutes from alarm going off to like hands on the steering wheel. And I drive off to do my first mobile bicycle tune-up because the bike shop is open from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m., 7 days a week. We work weekends, holidays. Like we're open quite a long time. We're trying to remove those pain points. Like customers want to have bike service before work, after work, when their kids are at school or not at school, whatever it is. But the idea is that we go to people's homes, we fix their bikes, we answer their questions, we give them great customer service, and then we go on to the next one and the next one. So I do that, for all intents and purposes, all day long. And then in between all those little appointments, or whenever I have small breaks or a gap in the schedule, or if I'm ahead of schedule and whatnot, that's when I fire open the inbox and I can handle most of the work with Somersault. Because most of event organizing these days is done virtually. Most of our events that we've done with Somersault have been long-standing, so we don't have to do very many site visits. Most of the relationships are built now, so a lot of the work is just done by DocuSign, luckily, not a whole lot of in-person signing, and then a lot of interacting with your customers over email. So it's my day-to-day is getting up pretty early, fixing bikes all day, answering emails on the inbox, planning events through, we have a whole list of Excel sheets and Gantt charts if you're into project management stuff. And then depending on the time of year, I'm getting home anywhere from 7 to 10 p.m., doing a quick dinner, spending time with my wife, doing it all over again.
Wow. Okay. Anything that you do specifically before you kind of hit the hay at night?
Nope, not really. It depends on the time of year. In the winter, we're obviously a lot quieter. Obviously, you can imagine the bicycle industry and the triathlon and running industry are very seasonal. So in the summer, I know it sounds hyperbolic, but when I get home from work, sometimes it's just how fast can I get to sleep to start the next day? Because every hour of sleep really helps. In the off season, when we're just not working around the clock, I do a mix of things. Most of my hobbies revolve around sports, to no one's surprise. So I enjoy swimming, biking, running. On the biking front, I have a fat bike, a cyclocross bike, a road bike. We have an e-bike for errands. I like to snowshoe, I ski, I rock climb. So in the winter, it's my activities and my friend circles are largely based around sport. So that's kind of the answer there. But in the summer, my get home from work routine is just start banking hours for sleep for the next day.
Yeah, okay. That was the next question is, what are the hobbies? So I guess a more specific question though here would be, how do you find that the fact that in the summer because a lot of young people today, especially, are mindful of this idea of work-life balance or work-life integration. And it sounds like for you, you kind of put off a lot of your hobbies to off-season time. And how does that work for you?
On a few fronts. One is kind of I've grown to learn and love it. Like I really enjoy the feast and famine of my industry. I know it sounds again like not everyone's cup of tea, but in the winter there's blocks of times where I can spend all day outside on a Tuesday when Gatineau Park is dead quiet, and I get to spend all day doing a nice morning swim and then going for a bike ride and then hit the trails and then maybe I do a couple hours at night kind of thing. So I really come to learn that by not doing a whole lot fitness wise in the summer, I can really appreciate my off season. And two, I've just kind of grown accustomed to it. I think if I was training all year long, like I used to be a fairly competitive athlete, and the body just can't handle like the full year life cycle for me, at least of hard training. So there's that, and then the mental break. Like I enjoy sports that are all year long. So I find if I lived in Florida or whatever, where I was running and biking all year long, I think I get kind of burnt out on it. So being able to go through these ebbs and flows, where now it's ski season, now it's this season, I've again come to appreciate it. And then lastly, with climate change, summer is just largely unbearable. So
Mm.
I just, even though I love all my sports, when it's 35 degrees outside, I have zero interest in going for a run. Like it's just gotten so hot and just so prolonged that I really don't mind taking a break in the summer. And for me, the best time of year to ride and run and everything is like September to November. And even now, like December is even a great month to do outdoor sports. Like we don't really have a whole lot of snow by Christmas these days. So even though you think like, oh man, like the bike season's busy until whatever October, and skis don't start until December or January, um, you can run in a t-shirt and shorts all the way until Christmas these days.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Obviously, something that you've thought about too, and have very specific reasons for. And what I really appreciate about your answer and the way you see this is that I think it holds up to the idea that a lot of young people today have a misperception about what it means to have a balanced life or to have an integrated life. So I like that you've got these real good reasons why you are able to dive into work completely, because many people, if they saw your work schedule or if they were thinking about working from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. In today's environment, there's a lot of backlash towards those things. So thanks for helping us understand the balance that you achieve on maybe a yearly basis. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's definitely unique, but it works for me.
Yeah, no, I relate to it a lot because I used to work on cruise ships where we'd have a long, 4-month contract and then be off for a month or two. And people found that 4 months you work a lot, right? You work all day, every day, 7 days a week. And some people didn't like that. And I loved that I had this opportunity, this light at the end of the tunnel where I could do anything I wanted with more freedom. So these are the kinds of things that we want to encourage our young people to find out about themselves. So it's really interesting. Thank you. We also talk a lot about the importance of failure, or call it what you will, mistakes, lessons. And we'd love to know what is a recent or important failure for you, and what do you learn from it?
So there's a couple things, and the answer is kind of holistic, which isn't really lost on this conversation we're having, but it's and it's more to do with, let's say, the Somersault Event series than it is with Velofix, but it's learning to adapt to risk factors. So it's one of those things where, as you can imagine, we organize triathlons, which is swimming and then biking and then running. We do running events and all kinds of other combinations. But when you apply for these permits and when you host these events, you have to think about all the what ifs. Like it's my job as the owner and race director to keep people safe. And there's some obvious ones like water safety. Like, are there enough lifeguards? Are they trained? Is the water going to be, chop free and clear? So if someone does go under, can you see them? And there's little things like, are two bozos on the bike course going to crash because they're not looking up? You have to plan for kind of some of the human error and all that. So if I may say, one of our strengths at Somersault was always risk management. Like we had a very long kind of emergency action plan, and whenever we applied to the city, that we constantly get feedback about how strong it was, and how some event organizers just say like, yeah, we will have security or we will have a medical team, but we really went above and beyond. But last year especially, a failure that we noticed was these external factors that we never thought would be a risk factor, and this kind of the old adage of you don't know what you don't know. So just to give you a couple of quick examples, we host 9 events a year, and this was right when I became the owner of Somersault. I'd been involved for a long time, but not as an owner. But our very first race of the year was on the day of the convoy in Ottawa. So the convoyers got hold of our event and they became hell bent on disrupting it, even though we weren't publicly posting anything about the convoy. They were just trying to get their voice heard. So, the police call us and say, what are you going to do if these guys attack your course? So they start attacking your athletes. And I go, well, we call the police. And they just weren't equipped to handle or intervene at an event like ours. So it was things like adapting our emergency action plan and kind of the failures where you plan everything and things still go wrong. So again, the first one was, the first event of the year was the convoy, where now we got to start planning around protesting and whatnot. Then we had another failure at our next event where it was the day of the derecho in Ottawa. We had all kinds of plans in place for heat, cold, rain, thunder, gas leaks, fire. Like we really planned for the gamut. We even have an earthquake plan when Ottawa doesn't really have earthquakes. I mean, we have tornadoes now apparently every week, but we really plan for everything. But now we had to plan for derechos. Our third event, we had really unprecedented water chop after the race had started. So we have all kinds of protocols where when you check for water clarity and depth and visibility and how big the waves are. And we had a situation where the water was calm as the last. We had 100 athletes into the water, and they got literally halfway through the course, and it became 2-foot tall white caps. So do you send them to the finish line? Do you send them back? Things like that. And then we had another event where my wife worked at Somersault and owned Somersault together. We get hired to work at third-party events where someone else organizes it, but we get hired for our expertise in this, that, or the other. So we were helping out on some of the other stuff, like kind of the run course and the bike course and things like that. And someone ended up passing away during the swim portion. It wasn't technically a drowning, but it was an opportunity for us to see what it means and what it's like to go through kind of an audit and say, well, someone passed away, there was something tragic here. How are you prepared? And you go through these learning. There's very few opportunities to learn from something without something going majorly wrong. So it was kind of fun to go through things with the derecho and the convoy and these white caps where no one got hurt in the end. And it was a very, very safe race, and we handled it, I think, really well. And that kind of built up to us being able to organize and help with a very, very well-rounded race and still have something go wrong where someone passed away. But to know that these failures, I don't want to say are inevitable, but you plan for them, and we had all kinds of protocol in place. And to have someone, not to get too into it, but to have someone pass away 20 meters from an ambulance, and then getting the best care that they could get and still not making it through was something that we learned a lot from.
Yeah. Wow. That's must be a little bit shocking, especially when you've done all the planning to be prepared or even emotionally for something like that. One of our favorite quotes at Discovery Year is, "The plan is nothing, the planning is everything," which sounds like it applies here. And something, I've learned for many years is you can plan as much as you want, and there will always be things that you'll need to plan that you don't know about, which is, I think, exactly what you're describing. So thank you. That's a great lesson that we share with our students a lot. So it's nice to put some anecdotes to it as well.
Awesome. I'm glad it resonates.
Yeah, it does. And I can only imagine the amount of planning you must have to do for events like that. Okay, I'd love to know a story about a lesson you've learned about relationships.
Totally. And I think I have the best one. So I feel like there's all these old adages about, never hire your friends or don't mix business with pleasure or whatever the anecdote is. And I think it's good to have mentors out there that can give you all kinds of advice and you can learn from their mistakes and from their trials and tribulations. But I also can't stress enough how helpful it is to learn for yourself. And on the Velofix side, it's been nothing but great for me. Like all the guys that work with me at Velofix that we've hired to be mechanics, even our bookkeeper, it's all friends and family. Like my closest friends now, the guys that I spend the most time with are obviously guys that I work with, given the amount of hours I work. But I hired friends to work with me at Velofix, and people, again, advised against it. They say it's never going to work. You're going to burn the bridge. But now it's been 8.5 years of working at Velofix with my closest friends. And I got invited to one of their weddings a few weeks ago. We still keep in touch. We keep in touch. We still hang out outside of work. We go for bike rides, things like that. My mother is my bookkeeper. So which is, again, it seems like a conflict of interest, but something that we spend time over, even though it sounds silly, but it works for us, is that we get a chance to keep in touch through bookkeeping. She'll ask me questions about the numbers and about the receipts and whatnot, but then we also get time to hang out as a family where it's not work related. And I think the best example would be on the Somersault side. I bought half of Somersaults in 2020, just before COVID hit, and then through the years of COVID, I ended up buying out my business partner. And then through the years of COVID, my wife, who's an ICU nurse, was looking at the workload and the stress load that comes with being the frontline healthcare worker, especially during those years. And it wasn't the work-life balance that she was hoping for. So again, without going into too much of that, my wife now works with me at Somersault, and we're 50-50 at Somersault. And again, I've heard nothing but bad things and nothing but, sage advice about not working with your wife. But I couldn't imagine doing anything different. I mean, it's one of those things where her and I still get to go out and do things for fun. Like tonight, we're going to a baseball game. We go for walks. We go on little weekend vacations, and we just got back from a month-long honeymoon, and where it was all pleasure, no business kind of thing. But then there's days where we'll sit down and we get our kicks from looking at traffic plans and figuring out who our sponsors are going to be and how many bananas do we have to order. So on the relationship side, I guess my Coles notes is to kind of figure it out for yourself. For some people, maybe business and pleasure are water and oil. But in my case, I think I have a great circle around me. Like I have a wonderful family. My relationship with my wife is something I've only ever dreamed of. And then I have a wonderful circle of friends that I'm able to hire over the years. It's made my work-life balance and just my quality of life that much better. Like I could just spend more time hanging out with people that I actually love and care for.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah. It's great. We're all about challenging kind of the messaging that we hear or that our students hear into the more traditional messages. And I agree with you. I'm on the what some psychologists call integrator side. So I like to integrate my work and personal life. There's the other camp is what we would call the segregators, and this is terminology used in some research in psychology. And I think I love your main point here, which is find out for yourself. Rather than just assuming that what someone tells you is the right thing, try it and see, and be open and honest with people, obviously, in those pursuits, which we could talk a lot more about, I'm sure, for you. What are the keys maybe to, maintaining positive relationships in those environments? Maybe we'll come back to that another time, just because we have a few other questions to get to, but I love that. And there's already been a number of important stories about work here, but is there any other story that you'd like to tell us that was an important lesson that you learned about work?
About work, gosh, I think it's a lot of the same. I think I learned by doing, and I think it's one of those things where I'm sure you've heard this from many other people, is if you can go back in time, would you change anything? There's some little tweaks here and there over the years that I would have changed, but I think learning the lessons over the years was incredibly valuable. I'm sure it took years off my life, and I'm sure someday I'll go bald prematurely. But I don't think I'd change it. I think now I have a lifestyle that I'm very proud of and that I really enjoy. And again, it's kind of like the conversation we had quickly about like enjoying the work-life balance kind of throughout the year. I think without having gone through those years of just a bit of burnout and just not knowing what I was doing and just taking on too much and just the trial by fire. Again, it's not something I recommend for most people. It really wasn't a good time in my life, but it led to some beautiful times in my life. And now I have a lifestyle that I wouldn't change for the world.
Yeah, so you kind of had to push yourself to, because I remember in previous conversations, with our students, you've mentioned there had been weeks of 120 something hours of work, I believe it was. So you're saying that you kind of had to experience that extreme version to understand maybe what your balance was. And obviously your balance, even through this conversation, people can probably see you're not looking to put in the minimum hours at work. You're someone who's very driven by what you do and you enjoy it. So you kind of had to have an extreme there where you could see, okay, this is too much. I'll pare it back a little bit.
Exactly. Is that I don't recommend anybody ever try working the 125 some hours that I was working like years ago. But it's one of those things where, at the time it felt necessary, where I would come home from my day and I was like, okay, I got to catch up on inventory. I'd catch up on inventory and go, okay, well, now the inbox is overflowing. And I just couldn't navigate like a system. And now if I may, and I'm just making up numbers now, but what I used to be able to do in 125 hours, I can now do in, let's say, 100 hours. And it's not because I'm doing less work, it's I'm working more efficient. I found tools that work for me. And then in some cases, I was able to hire out and kind of outsource a little bit. But by taking on a little bit too much, I learned where my limits are and I play within them. But then I've also been able to organize my life a little bit better. And I think I'm a pretty organized person. Like I really enjoy the spreadsheets, the Gantt charts, and I enjoy schedules, and I do well with all that stuff. And the systems that I have in place have allowed me to do other things, right? By having these little systems in place, I know exactly when I have to be at work and what I can take on and what I can say yes to and can say no to. As where before I was kind of a self-proclaimed, yes man, and I just took on everything. As where now I understand what's beyond my scope and what I'm good at, and how much room I have to take on new ventures. And then similarly, I know when I'm not at work. I know like when it's time to go for a run. I really enjoy that run. I know how long I can go for, and I get to enjoy the run. That's where I have friends who, let's say, they work that 9 to 5, and then they get home from 5 to 9, and they kind of lay around for a bit. They might get a half-hour run in, and I don't say it feels like the day is lost, because I think relaxation is important. I'm sure the balance for everybody is different, but I feel like I accomplished the same as most people would in a longer period of time, because I get in and I do it and I really enjoy it. I get home from work and I have time for a run. I have time for dinner with my wife. I got time to kind of veg for a bit, and then it's back to bed. And it feels like I got to do all the things on my checklist, and all the boxes are checked off or the lines are crossed off. I feel whole, and I feel kind of like my cup is full. But I didn't just, I don't want to say waste my time, but I got to really like, fill my boots on the work side, the fitness side, the relationship side. And I feel like you can do those things when you're organized, but it took a bit of, weed whacking to get there.
Mm-hmm. And the topic of burnout is obviously very much central in today's world. I think certainly among professionals, adults, if you will, but also among younger people, they're just more aware of that concept. And like I mentioned before, this idea of work-life balance. So if you could, retrospectively, is there any way that you identified that you were able to understand that was too much at that point, but not fully kind of run into burnout? Like it sounds like you were able to just kind of get to a place that was rough, but not completely lost. You didn't completely lose faith in your work, and you didn't write everything off. How did that happen? Do you have any insights around that?
Totally. And I track it kind of anecdotally, but again, it sounds worse than it is, but every year I kind of expect the burnout. And in the first years, it was the worst. Like I quite literally was like 25 pounds lighter than I am now. You're just not eating well. You're not taking care of yourself. You're physically sick. Like you just can't stare at another bicycle again. And it was one of those things where in the bicycle world, let's say the peak season starts around March, like usually around like the March break for school. Like once kids are off school, they're thinking about spring, and then it's kind of busy as heck until like Labor Day or Thanksgiving. And in the early days, like it was just, those 100 and some hour weeks from the get go. And, March would go by, you're feeling great. April's going by, you're thinking, oh man, this is great. Business is good. I can, it's going to be all right. And then May comes around. And then by end of May, you start getting into like physical burnout. Maybe you get some heat stroke from being in the van all day. And then it was just a slog all summer long. But then you come back the next year, you learn, and you as they say these days, you reiterate, or you find a new iteration. But over the years, my burnout phase, and again, it sounds bad to call it that, I expected, but it was going from May to June, July, August, and then last year, I think I got all the way until September, and I thought, oh, I'm past the hump. And then one of my mechanics went on a nice couple-week vacation, which is great. He earned it. But then I had to work a lot more in September than I normally do, and I felt like, oh man, I thought I was clear this year, and I kind of went through a bit of that, again, a much more subdued burnout. And I do all kinds of things to make the heat stroke stuff and things like that. But for me, I can physically see it just moving further down the calendar, where all of a sudden I can work 100 to 110 to 115 hours a week, like comfortably, and I love what I do, and I have the best customers in the world. And now I can do that all the way from March until September, October, and if I'm lucky this year, I'll probably avoid it all. But last year, I think I was able to make it pretty much to the end, except from that unexpected little bump in workload in September. But I wish it was perfect all year round, where I was able to work a consistent kind of less, but all year round kind of thing. But with the way it is, I'm pretty happy to see that I've been able to push that all the way to as far as it is. And now it seems like I might get away with a cycle that I'm quite happy with, and that I can kind of maintain for years to come with no burnout.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like that period of like kind of the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, is key for you. And it's, for me at least anyway, sometimes who is also butted up against burnout, especially through COVID. It's inspiring to hear that, if you do take that pause, you can regenerate or rejuvenate the passion and the excitement and the work ethic that you had previously, because I think that's important for people to know, that it can come back if you kind of take care of it and you learn from it when it happens.
Totally.
Okay, so you've obviously hired people. You're a business owner, and I'm sure you have all different types, especially through Velofix. Obviously, you're hiring bike mechanics largely, and then with Somersault, I'm sure there's a variety of different roles and positions that you hire. So this podcast is really for young people that are kind of entering into the workforce. And I'd love to hear from your perspective in the last number of years hiring people. What are the skills attitudes, behaviors that you're looking for in young people, regardless perhaps of the position that they might be filling? What are you looking for when you're interviewing people, when you're looking at resumes? What kind of attributes are most important to you?
Totally, yeah. And I'll kind of answer what you said not to answer first, I guess. But I find the first thing is finding the skills that match the person. Like on the somersault side, it's more obvious, where you can imagine if there's a triathlon, you have certain people who are very extroverted, and you need to find people who want to be, let's say, at the awards ceremony or at the finish line doing the cheerleading side of things. But then we have guys and girls who apply to somersault, and they're very introverted, but we can find them a good position doing, setup and tear down, being at the road barrier where there's no real human interaction. So I think one thing that Elizabeth and I have done really well is matching people to their skill sets. Like we have people that come to us and we just assume that everyone wants the best job, and the best job is usually handing out water, being kind of the fun person that everyone loves to see, like the very positive kind of positions. But we've had people that we've hired who just don't love that stuff, and they're like, oh, I want to just move barriers and cones, and I want to be involved with setting up bike racks and heavy lifting and things like that. So I think the big thing is kind of setting, I don't want to say setting expectations, but laying out what you really are good at, what your skill set is, and what your interests are. And I think that kind of bleeds into the second part of your question. Is I always find, again, well, there's two parts to that answer, I guess, is just people that are genuinely curious and want to learn. I think you can teach anybody. On the Velofix side, it's much more obvious. If I can put it, again, a little more tangibly, is that the perfect Velofix mechanic for us, because we're a mobile bicycle shop, the only hard in and out is that they have to have a valid driver's license. You can't really fake that. But a good mechanic, or a good Velofix mechanic at least, is mechanically inclined. They're a positive person. They're good with customers. They have great customer service, because even though we're doing the bicycle repair, customer might want to ask, like, hey, where do you ride? Or I just got into cycling. Where's a good spot to go mountain biking or road biking? Or do you know of any events? Or like, hey, I'm trying to sell this bike. Do you know anybody that might be interested? And kind of making those connections. Like, oh yeah, there's a guy yesterday who I know who's selling a bike that might kind of fit you. But of all those things, aside from the driver's license, the only part that we can't teach is the mechanic side. So if you look at that from a step back, you think, like, if we can find someone who is hungry to learn and is very personable and just enjoys the customer service side just as much as they enjoy the other aspects of the job in physical capacity, then we can teach a good mechanic, someone who's eager to learn and is, somewhat mechanically inclined. Or some people, again, can't turn a light bulb, so to speak. So maybe they're not the best person for the job. But within reason, anybody can be taught to fix a bicycle. The same way anybody can be taught. Even you, Jay, there's hope for you, buddy. And anybody can be taught to learn skills to the job, right? If you're like I'll give you a great example. I'm sure if push came to shove, you could learn to do any number of things, right? And I'm sure if you had to, you'd pump gas, you'd learn to code, you could do any gamut of jobs, because I think you have like the interpersonal skills to do a wide range of things. So once you find out what someone's underlying kind of characteristics are, you can kind of guide them towards different roles depending on what your company or your business kind of has to fill in. But in the Velofix world, it's much more specific, where we kind of need to have that person who is introverted and a little bit of a social butterfly, but the skills can learn. So don't be afraid to apply to a job or look at a career path that you might not have. I think if you learn those interests, to a degree.
Okay, pause a second. We just you were choppy there for a second. We'll have to kind of, I think, cut a bit here. So if you wouldn't mind just going back, that last part is just kind of everything from, you were kind of saying, hey, like, don't worry if you don't feel like you have the skills. It looks like it's still pretty choppy.
Oh, say that again. Now I listen there, Jay.
What's that?
You're back.
Yeah, you started getting choppy there when you were just kind of describing, don't be.
More time there?
It's still choppy.
Can you okay? Or I'll just wait it out, or in place.
Okay, thanks, Adam. So One last question for you. And the context of this question is that in the world today, many young people feel significantly more pressure at a young age to find success, be happy, make lots of money, be admired by their peers and their family at a young age. They see a lot of images and hear a lot of stories in the world that are largely falsified about how other people are doing. And so a big part of what we want to do in these conversations is help students kind of just better see a real picture. And you've done a great job of doing that so far. But in this world where young people might feel a lot of pressure to be very successful at a young age, we'd love to end this with your words of wisdom. What do you suggest to them as they kind of embark on their journey into adulthood? What are the kind of most important words you can leave for them?
I think above all, it has to be just to explore your interests. I know it sounds again like kind of Disney or cliche, but I mean, I was in university studying science, and I had plans to go into physiotherapy or something else. Um, and I got a part-time job at a bicycle just to kind of help, like, pay some tuition fees. And it was like, 1 day a week, only in the summer because we have summers off as a student. And lo and behold, like that's what got me hooked into the bicycle industry. But I was always someone that had multiple kind of part-time jobs. I would volunteer a ton, not because I was looking for success or a job or whatever. It was more just someone to do. Or I had friends and we would organize, like, you kind of look back in hindsight. I had a friend in university who was diabetic, and we used to organize these little like Mickey Mouse like volleyball tournaments, like beach volleyball tournament. It was like $20 to sign up, and all the money raised went to like Team Diabetes. And lo and behold, like those, I don't want to call them stupid, but those stupid little fundraisers where we got $200 in cash for a charity is now what I do for a living. And it's never what I thought it was going to be. So all those things that you put intent to, like you intend with a lot of intent, you choose what you're going to study in university, and you choose what program you might do and what trips you might take and what relationships you're going to focus on. I think above all, it has to be just kind of casting a wide net, because the opportunities, I don't want to say they'll find you, but it was in my life historically. If you kind of look back with again a bit of like hindsight, it was the things that I had no intent on that really ended up becoming kind of core memories and core moments and kind of those forks in the road for me. So I'd say just try different things, say yes to a lot of opportunities, put yourself out there. Even if you're not looking, even if you are looking for like the success and the money and whatnot, you might just walk away with some cool friendships or some cool stories. I've had a chance to work at the London Olympics through one of these opportunities. I've had a chance to meet some of my best friends now through very very unique and kind of haphazard kind of interactions and stuff like that. So it's not always going to come from where you think it's going to come from.
Amazing. And last question then for you is, so what I've experienced is that there are many people in the world who will try different things, and they will intuitively understand that they're drawn. Let's use this case of, becoming a bike mechanic 1 day a week. They'll say, okay, well, I'm going to be a doctor, but in the meantime, I'm going to do this thing because it's interesting to me and I'm going to learn something from it. And some people will eventually kind of come to understand how important that bike mechanic role is, or how, that area of their life is. And other people will, and then they'll pursue it. And other people will say, well, understand intuitively it's important, but they can't quite pull themselves away from the anchor or the family pressure or the societal pressure to pursue this other thing that is supposedly more important. So what was important for you in being able to make that decision, if you know, to
Yeah.
follow
So for
that
me,
interest?
yeah, and it was very tangible, and it kind of came to the breaking point that you kind of talked about. Is you go from being the part-time guy at the bike shop, and then I'd pick up an extra shift here and there, and then eventually I was working full-time year-round. Like through even when I was going to school, I still had a full-time job at the bike shop. And I eventually became kind of the manager of the bike shop, and yada yada. And it was kind of a core part of my life in those days. And then it got to the point where I finished my 4 year degree. And here I am where I had a very generalist degree where you couldn't really do a whole lot with a Bachelor of Science in Human Kinetics. You usually go on to do physio, medicine, education, teaching, or whatever it is. But I was 22 or 23 years old, and I'd worked at a bike shop for 4 years, and I was kind of at that crossroads where it's like, okay, like, well, now here's the breaking point. I have to either make the conscious effort to apply to another program and go and pursue my education, or I start looking at what my career is going to be. And if I go into the bike industry thing, maybe my career isn't related to what I study, but it was kind of that crossroads, right? So that's when I looked at it and I said, well, here's a natural breaking point. Do I want to stay at the same bike shop and do the same job that I have now for the next 40 years until I'm 65 years old? Probably not. But do I want to leave all that behind and kind of focus on medicine or physio? Also probably not. So that's when I took a step back and I look at Well, I love kinesiology. The human body so fascinates me to a large degree. I love bicycles. I love sales. I love customer service. And, what kind of combines all those things? And then I started looking for the job that kind of fit that bill. And that's where I came across Velofix. We used to do a lot of bike fitting, which applied a lot to the biomechanics side of my education. A lot of the stuff I learned at school helped with just my organizational stuff and whatnot. But I waited till I kind of got to that breaking point. I think it would have been hard and unwise to kind of like leave school 3 years into a 4-year degree just to pursue the bike thing. But I also think it would have been unwise to leave my job and focus on school and not be able to fund it somehow, right? So for me, there was a natural breaking point, but it was taking that step back and looking at like, well, what do I enjoy and what am I good at? And what do I want to do with my time? And then I started kind of vetting different things. I could have worked for a bicycle manufacturer like Shimano. I could have just kept working at a bike shop in different capacities. I could have looked into becoming an owner at a current bike shop. But a lot of times the bike shop, you're either a mechanic or you're in sales, and you don't get to do both. With Velofix now, I get to do, I'm one-on-one with my customers. I get to work on one bike at a time. I get my hands dirty every single day, as you can kind of tell. And it was the perfect kind of overlap in that Venn diagram where it fit all of my skills and interests.
And is it safe to say that when you started as a bike mechanic, you did not know that Velofix, maybe it didn't even exist at the time, but you certainly didn't know that that was a possibility. Is that fair to say?
Totally, yeah. I had to actively seek it out. Like I was Googling online, like jobs in the bike industry, and I was on like, at the time, I guess it was monster.ca. I think now they're under the Indeed umbrella or something like that. But I was actively looking for job postings and talking to friends and looking online to see what other people were doing that were kind of like me. And Velofix was just one of the options. It wasn't like I saw it and it was the light bulb. It was like, okay, let's put this on the list. And I kind of went down the options that I kind of saw. And then through the vetting process, I thought, hey, I'll buy a van. So I have this mobile bike shop. It was one van, and the plan was to just be me in the van until forever. And then even then, I didn't plan to have call it 4 or 5 vans and employees, and then another business, and then et cetera, et cetera. The plan has changed. Yeah, whatever you're saying about the plan means nothing and the planning is everything. The plan has changed every year for the last 10 years. So here we are.
Beautiful. Yeah, we talk a lot about short-term planning at Discovery as well, and the importance of that versus trying to project 40 years down the road, which is largely ineffective. So I'm hearing, try the stuff that piques your curiosity, work hard until the point where you feel like you can't work hard anymore, and then maybe think about what a better balance is. Decide for yourself whether you want to separate your work and your personal lives. And most importantly, what I've taken away from this is that you value when things go wrong. In fact, like I can see that you deeply value that, you anticipate it. Not that you enjoy the failure, but you enjoy the growth that comes from it. So you're a great shining example, very inspiring, Adam. Thank you very much for spending your time with us. And I'm sure all of our students look forward to meeting you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I look forward to seeing the class in person or virtually, however it is. But thanks again for having me out.
Thanks, Adam.